Hi, everyone. I'm Roy Vagelos. I'm not Sue Desmond-Hellmann, who is the chair of the selection committee of Prix Galien, and she was responsible for putting together the whole show today, not I. But she's ill, unable to come, and so I'm standing in for her temporarily, for a very short time, I hope. This afternoon, to kick off, we're going to be discussing how will the people of the United States be paying for their drugs 10 years from now. And we have a distinguished group who will be introduced by my co-chair, Mike Rosenblatt, who will succeed me in one moment. Just a few comments to start the thought process, and that is at the current time, as we look around the country, the biopharmaceutical industry reputation has dropped over the years, so that now we are down close to the very bottom of all industry. People dislike us, although over the last 25, 30 years, the industry has improved lifespan, the quality of life, and everything looks great for the future, coming from the research labs, largely in the United, not exclusively, but largely in the United States. The problem with our reputation boils down to people believing that we have prices that are too high. And this is dramatically being carried, this notion, by our president, both the House of Representatives and the Senate, that each of the groups, and Trump specifically, saying that they're really going to punch down the prices of medicines, vaccines, etc. And so we are in a peculiar situation where we think we're doing good for people, but people dislike us because of our prices. And so the question is, how do we handle this? And is it true? Are our prices too high? And what can we do about it? The last thing we would like to happen is that for the government to step in and control our prices. Because as you'll hear from the panel, our prices in the U.S. are significantly higher than they are around the world, and the U.S. citizens are paying for the research, largely for the research that is producing much of the innovation. And so that's a tight thing. Pricing comes at two times, two major times. The time that the drug is launched, you know all about it, the company knows about it, the value, and the trick is to come up with a price that in my view, that the customers, the patients, and the doctors, very especially the doctors, feel is a fair price. And fair, I would define as a price that fits in with the value to the patient, not the cost of that particular medicine, either in making it or largely the research behind it. And therefore, we should be married to the value to the patient. I think if we could convince patients that was the case, there wouldn't be so much unhappiness. So that's the one thing. The initial price has to be in line with value to the patient. Secondly, what has happened over the years are annual price increases that sometimes even become 2 times a year price increases, where a drug, which is a good drug, is introduced 15 years ago at one price, and 15 years later is 3 times as high, with no changes in the drug at all. And so that has happened in our industry. I find that kind of hard to defend, and I wouldn't even try. But those are the 2 things that happen. So we're here to speak for the industry, and then we're here also to receive questions. And so I'm going to turn to Mike Rosenblatt, who has many of the answers, and will. And he's a good friend. The 2 of us have been working together for I don't know how many years. Okay, Mike, take over.
Well, The problem is I worked for Roy, so I can't contradict anything he said. I don't have all the answers. But we've got three great panelists who are CEOs, and of course Roy is a former CEO. They are representing some of the most important companies in our ecosystem. As Roy said, we're going to focus on the US market and how that might evolve 10 years from now, but undoubtedly we're going to get into problems of today. And so I'm going to introduce the speakers, and then we will have each of them just speak for a few minutes from their seats about their view. And then Roy and I will circle back with follow-up questions to them. And we'll do that for a little bit and try to take the temperature of the room. And at some point, we'll switch over to take questions from all of you, because I imagine there are going to be a lot of questions from you. To my near left is Albert Bourla, who is the CEO of Pfizer. I'm not going to go through more of a bio because it's in your books. And then to my right is Jacqualyn Fouse, who's the CEO of Agios. And then all the way to the left, Christophe, who's the CEO of Takeda. And I think we'll take them in that order, the alphabetical order, just some opening statements, no questions at that point. And when all three of the CEOs are done, then we'll have some follow-up questions. So Albert, please.
Thank you very much. And first, let me say that it is a great honor for me to be part of such an esteemed panel of colleagues here, and particularly to be on the same panel with a legend like Roy Vangelos. It's really a great honor for me, and also I'm very happy that we have a full house today. Apparently the topic attracts attention. So how are we going to speak, how are we going to pay about medicines in 10 years from now? I think before, let's understand what is the cost of medicines. And I think when we speak about cost of medicines, we are referring to two distinct, different topics. The first is, what is the cost of medicines to the healthcare system? How much the government, through Medicare, or the employers, they have to pay to purchase a medicine. The second, it is what is the cost of the medicine to the user, to the patient that is going to collect or to fulfill his script from the pharmacy. How much the senior will pay out of pocket, or how much the employee will pay out of pocket. Both of them have their own issues, but they are in a very, very different status right now. The first one, it is an issue that it's relatively small. The total cost of medicines for the healthcare system, it is 12%. Maybe there is much disproportionately publicity and discussion about that smaller percentage that should make us think. But in reality, it's small. It is 12% in the US. And in fact, it is smaller than in other countries, which also is strange. If you see what is the average in the world, in the OECD, it is 15%. And in France or UK, in France or in Germany, it could be 16%. The reason is not because the medicines in the US are cheaper than in France. The reason is that everything is more expensive in the US, and it is compared to surgery, or compared to physician visits, or compared to the cost of other interventions, there is much bigger difference. This cost remains 12% for the last decade. There was an issue that everything was going up in the US, including pharmaceuticals. And I remember the days that pharmaceuticals will increase prices twice a year, almost double digit. And we can discuss the reasons, but the bottom of the reason was that the whole system that has been built to control the prices of pharmaceuticals was not working. Right now, if you see the statistics, I can tell you about Pfizer. Last year, we had a -2% in our net pricing in the US. And this year, the first half of the year, we announced -1 in our US pricing. This is audited data, right? But I'm sure, and I'm going to the second topic, that the patients that are taking our medicines didn't experience this -2 or -1. Likely they experienced +10, +15, +30, +50. Because how much they pay, it is not that much related to the price of the medicine, it is more related to the design of the benefit that they are enjoying. And the benefit design is moving more and more and more, year after year, cost of the medicines to the patient rather than to the premium. So instead of increasing the prices of the premiums, they prefer to send the cost to the patient. But with this situation, we have created something that is completely out of hand. Right now in the US, the patients are paying for their medicines like if they are not insured, although they are. And right now, the patients are having significant issues to be able to, when in the unfortunate moment that they get sick, they cannot just afford it. What is happening is that we have a system that the sick are subsidizing the healthy by moving the cost to the patient rather than to the premium. And this is not what insurance is about. It's exactly the opposite. The healthy should subsidize the sick. So as long as we know this, I think we can dive into a very interesting discussion about what we can do about the first and the second.
Thanks, Albert. Jackie.
Thank you. And if you don't mind, I'm going to stand up just so I can't see these people right here, and it makes me a little more comfortable if I can see everybody. So I agree with what Albert said, and I'll try to say something that's maybe complementary to that and consistent, hopefully, but not too repetitive. If we pull up to a really high level, I think there are two concepts for me that I keep in mind when I think about what we at Agios can do individually as a company, how we can work with our peers in industry, and how we work with others in the healthcare ecosystem, and they help guide how we make decisions, and I think they could be applicable for all of us. The first thing is related to staying patient-centric, and Albert started speaking about that. And I think I have been, I'm a breast cancer survivor. I had it twice. My mother had it once. We had no issues with the genetic testing, so it was just luck of the draw, so to speak. And as a patient and speaking with other patients, if we start with the patient perspective on it, which is why we have a healthcare system to begin with, what do they care about? An accurate diagnosis. So we have some room to improve there when we think about some of the diagnostics and how we pay for those and how we make them available. Accurate diagnosis. The next thing you want to know is that there are treatments for you. So if we don't invest in innovation, we're not going to produce the treatments that give patients and healthcare providers the choice of how they're treating their disease. And then you want to know about side effects and all those sorts of things and how it's going to affect your daily life. And then the next thing you want to know about is how much is it going to cost you. And with the fragmented system that we have in this country today, and to some of the points that Albert was making, a patient doesn't always know what the cost of their treatment is going to be. And their healthcare provider may not even know what the cost of their treatment is going to be. So I think we need to do something about that. The second high-level thing that I would say is, we're talking about medicines here today. We should talk about medicines. There are some things I think we can do to chip away at inefficiencies in the system and transparency and fairness and how we price medicines and all of those things. But we also need to think about how all of the components of the healthcare system come together to deliver therapies to patients. And that includes the government with our policies and government-administered programs. It includes the research that is done within the government, which is not the research in this country that brings drugs to market. It includes insurers. It includes patient advocacy groups. It includes manufacturers and supply chain, all of that sort of things. We have shortages of generic products that are cheap today. It doesn't matter how much they cost. We don't have them because we have manufacturing issues. And we need industry because we're the ones that are investing in the innovation that's going to bring the new therapies to patients. So I think it's hard to pick at just one part of that ecosystem without thinking about what all the implications for the system are of those different things. That being said, I think individually we have opportunities in the different roles that we play in the system to continue to improve. We also have to find ways to work together a little bit more.
Thanks, Jackie. And Christophe, please.
Yeah, great. A few thoughts to complement what has been said. First, I think in the next 10 years, the overall cost will increase. Overall cost. Why? Because many of us will live until 100 years old. And we are living a period of huge innovation. Innovation is generating more opportunities to treat better, disease, and we know very well when people are living longer, there is a cost associated to that. So I think this is very important to have in mind. We need to create a system which will allow that to happen, because we will live longer, and there will be so many new innovations which will treat better disease. The quality of life will increase tremendously, and we will have a lot of people living with a very good quality of life until they are 100 years old. So here we are talking about financing that, and we shouldn't think that we will reduce the cost of healthcare or reduce the cost of medicine overall. It would be a huge mistake for the humanity to think that. So I think that's for me very, very important to have in mind. And you know what is striking when we talked about healthcare system is that first, every healthcare system has its problem. So it's a huge question for all societies. The question is, how do you create an insurance system which is efficient enough to cover catastrophic events, so that when people are facing a catastrophic event, they are covered by the healthy people who are contributing to that systems. And then to make sure that there are enough safeguards in the system so that you don't have this situation where a family is getting bankrupt because the system is not prepared for that. The co-payment, for example, is an interesting concept. It's a huge issue in the United States. But co-payment exists in many countries. In many countries, you have a 30% co-payment on the price of medicine. But there are safeguards, there are caps. So in order to manage the situation where you are facing a catastrophic situation, and the system is protecting the patient from this type of catastrophic events. I really feel that this is what is missing in many parts of the US healthcare system, is that it's not protecting enough people when they are facing this type of situation. The last thought I will share is that we need to be very careful with overreacting to the situation which are not perfect. It's not by chance that 70% of the new molecule are coming from the United States. It's because through its healthcare system, the United States has created the innovation engine of the world. And we need to be very careful because an overreaction will certainly potentially kill the innovation. And I think this is what we are facing as an industry. We need to explain the equilibrium between cost and innovation and make sure that there is not an overreaction which will potentially damage the innovation engine which is existing in the United States.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let me just put a question and start with you, Jackie. One of the big players in the delivery of drugs in the United States are the Pharmacy Benefits Management Group, who are the intermediaries and who are blamed now by some for the very high prices. And I would like to have that discussed, and also discuss whether you think retention of the PBM system is a good thing or a bad thing.
Thank you. It's a big question. So I think given the fragmented nature of the system that we have in the U.S. today, there is a role for something like a PBM in the negotiating process, because all parties in the system are not created equal or not necessarily able to negotiate to the same extent. At the same time, if we believe that what some of us talked about in terms of the high-level principles, if we're thinking about patients first and overall cost to the system and inefficiencies and things like that, I think we need more transparency as to what's going on when there are discounts negotiated and where do those discounts go. Because if we don't have that understanding, then I think we get disconnects around list prices versus net prices and who's getting how much of the profits in the system and whether any of it's coming back to the patient or not. So I am a big proponent of transparency across the whole system. drug prices and everything else in the system, including what's going on with the PBMs and what's going on with how we price our products in industry and how you get from gross to net and all of those sorts of things. So role, yes. Transparency, yes.
Thank you. Albert?
Look, definitely I think that play a role, and I don't see the US without PBMs, to make it clear. But I think they need to have a significant reform. The way that they have developed the system of negotiating prices is full of perverse incentives, and this is the main reason why situation went out of hand. Not alone. We played also with that. We engaged into the temptation, because the people that were supposed to control the prices were the people that will encourage you to increase your list price, and then you can get away as long as you create a big gap between the net and the list. Okay, this is the whole incentive in the system that created the situation that we have now. And there's another problem with the PBMs, the way that they are until now, that they only care about a small part of the healthcare system cost. And they ignore completely what consequences their policies will have in the remaining 90% of the healthcare system cost. Because if I am only incentivized to reduce the cost of medicines, for example, I can reduce access to cardiovascular medicines for a patient, and I don't care if that will increase the number of bypass surgeries that will happen in the system, because I'm not measured on that. And that is the second problem that needs to be reformed. Now, the market in the last few years, actually the last 1-2 years, by accident, I don't think it was on purpose, but the top 3 PBMs that they are controlling 80+% of the lives in the US have been bought by insurance companies. That's good, in my opinion, because that will make the incentives of the whole corporation, okay, much more aligned with the holistic cost of the healthcare system, rather than focus our attention in a smaller part. But it will take time, one, to change their business model, because these are corporations that have not been integrated overall within the insurance companies. They have very strong cultures, and they have a system that creates a lot of money right now. The PBMs are making much more than the insurance companies. So for the insurance companies to say that I'm going to reform that for the long-term gain, it will take some courage to do it.
Thank you, Albert.
Well, I think, yes, if I deeply believe that we should price medicine according to the value we create. And this value, we know very well, is a horizontal value of the disease cost. And today, this is not something you see, and I hope it will evolve towards that. That would be, I think, a very fair rules. We get the price which, according to the value we create. But, so a value-based approach, I think, is very important for our future. I think it will improve our reputation as well, because there is a logic. But this is an evolution that we need to see. Not many countries are providing that, but this is really something that we should support, I think, because I think it will transform the way the value of medicine is perceived, and we will be able to demonstrate that our price is justified. And I think we need, in any system, we need a negotiator, because contrary to other markets, the patients are captured, so they cannot negotiate. They have to use a treatment, they are sick, so you need to have an intermediary somewhere to negotiate the price. So whether it is PBM or government, there are pros and cons with both. But I think the PBM can work if you have this horizontal view about the disease cost.
I think there's another, if I can jump in, I think there's another, to that point, another aspect about the amount of investment that's going back into the system. And some of my academic degrees are in economics. You should be able to earn a return on that investment. So I'll ask the question, is a PBM investing anything in the healthcare system, either to promote innovation or build infrastructure? So what should that profit level be that they earn, and who's doing the investing in the system? in research and development, in manufacturing capability, and those are the parties that are creating the whole system to get the products
Is
to
this
patients.
proportional gains for the risk they take?
Yes, it should be proportional gains to the risk that's taken and the amount of capital put up. So. There's a role that they have to play in the supply chain in terms of delivering getting the product in patients' hands. So there's something. I think we just have to look at each party and what their role is, and they should be able to earn a return deemed by somebody. To be fair, we can get into that discussion. It may take us all day, but with respect to their contribution to getting good therapies to patients.
Well, that's why
Well, if you go back to the value proposition that is being emphasized, that's another lens to look at this through. So what's the value of negotiating and then shipping and handling versus the value of all the R&D investment and what comes out? I wonder, we've been talking a lot about things that sound like hydraulics on our current system. Push down here, squeeze the balloon there. But some of your companies are experimenting with different ways of paying, and if we fast forward 10 years from now, I hear about mortgage-type models for very expensive medicines, paying over a period of time, or the state of Louisiana has a subscription model that they had or have in hepatitis C. And are there other models that you think are going to be an important part of the way we pay for medicines a decade from now? And I'd love to hear from each of you on that.
I think yes, and I think that will be a very good solution, because I think eventually we can all agree that if we agree on the value, that we can take a fair share of the value that the medicines are creating. And there is a lot of activity right now happening on that. Pfizer is having a dedicated group, and they are brilliant people that are thinking about alternative ways and alternative models, and they are discussing. And I'm in discussions with so many other CEOs about how they do, and I know that all of them, they are trying, in most companies right now, they are trying to find this type of value-based agreements. And it's the more the cost of the medicine, let me put it another way, the more the treatments that we bring are more breakthrough, which means that they result in cures-like solutions rather than in chronic use, it is very obvious that there will be a sticker shock to the system. So the first part of the price will be very high, and then, of course, there is zero cost to the system, or much more limited cost to the system. So although it is cost-effective, they create a cash flow issue that needs to be addressed. So for this reason, the value-based agreements could find their ways. But I'm very disappointed with the progress. It's very disappointed with the progress so far. Very, very little. And again, I'm asking people and my peers in the industry if they have better results, and no one has. Because there are some agreements, but they are putting at risk 1 or 2 or 3%. This is not a value-based agreement, right? If you hit that, I'm going to give you 3%. And by the way, all the agreements it is, I'm going to give you less, not more, right? And I think, again, the reasons for not seeing that, it is that incentives. Right now, why a PBM that doesn't care about the value that the system will see downstream will agree on a price that will be based on something like that? They don't share this value. And this is the reason, because there is a lot of pressure, that we have seen some agreements, but basically painless agreements for all. No one is having skin on the game. It's very disappointing. And that's why we see when we have integrated systems or holistic approach like a government or, let's say, a state or some Kaiser, for example, systems that they are holistically integrated, over there you see much, much better progress. Because over there, people care about the value that we'll see. So I think we need to address this fundamentally, and many other things that they are on the way right now. There is need for legislation changes. Many times, if you have a value-based agreement, then you need to give that as the lowest price to Medicaid and many other things that needs, or to veterans. So you need to address some exceptions for current rules. But the fundamental is you need to have people on the other side of the table that he cares, he's interested or she is interested to see the value that your product brings, and not only to see what is the difference between gross and net, because this is what makes the money.
I mean, we see some, we are a big believer at value-based contracting, value-based healthcare at Takeda. We have, but what we see is that we are doing actually more of this type of agreement in Europe currently than in the United States.
I agree, the same.
There is in Nordic countries, in some countries, it's really starting very strongly, which is great. I think we do see some emergence, but usually they are not coming from the PBMs, they are coming from the companies which are directly managing the life of people because they see the long-term impact potentially of value-based healthcare. But I think as an industry, I truly believe we need to really focus on that direction, and it will be a long-term, but it changed completely the dialogue with payers, because it's becoming data-driven, it's a partnership, you need to generate outcome. It's not a transaction anymore, it's a partnership. And I think for our industry, it would be it's a great evolution that we need to enter into.
I think an aspect of that could also be pay for performance types of structures. The value-based systems, and I believe in them too and agree with them, are often going to be driven by data that uses averages and things like that. And if we come back to a patient-centric focus and try to think about things like personalized medicine and all of that, which is a little bit of a buzzword, but if we want to get the right therapies to the right patients, there may be an opportunity to negotiate some performance arrangements where if the patient benefits from the therapy, it gets paid for. If they don't, then there's some reimbursement of the cost of that. And that would deal a little bit more with individual patient outcomes and not just averages, maybe.
Okay, we will, I think these are good starting points, and we'll open the discussion right and question from the audience. Jeff?
Let's get your microphone.
Dr. Lieberman here. We need a microphone, please.
Maybe you can speak to those on the stage. No, there are some microphones. I mean, here, maybe you.
Here we go.
Here we go.
We can repeat the question.
I think there's two parts to the problem of
Identify yourself, Dr. Lieberman.
This is Jeffrey Lieberman. I work for Roy Vagelos also, so I won't contradict him at Columbia University.
Everybody
work for Roy.
Or another worked for Roy.
I haven't yet, but I'm going to.
Friend of Roy.
I think there's two parts to the problem. One is the cost of drugs, and one is the perception of the high cost of drugs. As Dr. Bourla mentioned, pharmaceuticals actually account for a relatively small proportion of the total GDP expenditure on healthcare, but it's the one that gets singled out. And I think it was the gentleman from Oracle was talking about the $165,000 charge for the operating room. The providers, the insurance companies, the pharmacies, all this gets lumped in, but it's drug pricing, which is kind of the poster child. And the problem there is, how do you get yourself off the front page? But the reality is that you have to deal with the healthcare system as a whole and the financing system that supports it. And we don't have a healthcare system, we have a health business system. So it's like every stakeholder is on their own. So there is actually price regulation for drugs. It's de facto, the VA, the Medicare, hospitals negotiate with rates, what percent of Medicare are we going to get from Aetna, for our better quality of care. But, you're stuck, and it's not so much the reality of drug pricing as the perception of it. And I can't say that I have a solution for how you fix that, given the fact it's tied into this broader macro system of our healthcare policy and healthcare financing system.
I would say that the issue that you are pointing out is one of the most important that we have right now. In a recent Gallup survey that was a couple of months ago released, the pharmaceutical industry was on the bottom of the list, the last one, with the US government being the one before the last. How can you be lower than the government? This is a very, very big problem, has been created historically. I think the good old days that science and pharmaceutical companies were delivering a lot of solutions to the healthcare system that was transformational. They changed the heat map of the disease heat map of humanity. Let's say Lipitor, for example. Let's use an example that comes from my company. We kept talking about how much money we make from Lipitor instead of talking how many lives have been saved in humanity because of Lipitor. That we brought it to ourselves. Very big mistake, and we should really think about our purpose in life based on what we are not here to make money for shareholders. We are here to create breakthroughs that change patients' lives. And this is an open market, and the shareholders that they want to invest in such a vision, they can invest. And that's why this vision is also to be profitable, so that the machine can continue going on.
I must say, Albert, that is a change that I have seen happen since I've been around so long, having been in the industry for so long. Truly, the people working in the industry in the 1970s were people who wanted to improve lives of people. No one was in the industry to get rich. That changed dramatically over the years, and it's gone too far. And so, but you're absolutely right. Christophe, you're about to say
But also to add that reputation, unfortunately, you can earn it in drops, and you can lose it in buckets. So, and we lost it, right? So it's very, very difficult to bring it back. And it is one of the most important things that the industry needs to do, because we are dealing with government. It's a highly regulated industry, so they can do whatever they want to you. And secondly, they are the biggest, or some cases, the only customer. And the governments, they have the tendency to benefit or favor people that their constituents like, and disfavor people that their constituents do not like. And right now we are in the second category, so it's very risky.
I think the reputation will always be a tough one for us. That's why we shouldn't do any mistakes, and we should be very focused on that. But it will always be a tough one, because from the patient point of view, they see the medicine as a pill they take. It's depersonalized. They don't know us. They don't see us. They see us as a business. The other part of the healthcare system, they have human connection. They go to the hospitals. They see their doctors. And so they have a reputational credit immediately because of this connectivity that they have with the other part of the healthcare system. So for us, one key element is to have the other healthcare member of the system to also speak positively about the industry, especially the doctors. And I think we lost that in the last decade. We need to, because it's very important if a patient complain about the cost of a medicine, it's very important. To whom will they complain? To their family, but to their doctor, for example, or to their pharmacist. If we don't have the healthcare professional on our side, it will be very difficult.
Well, my viewpoint might be a little different on some of this. So I think while people care about the cost of medicines to society, to government, et cetera, the real ouch is the out-of-pocket expense, which you add up by taking the insurance premium, the deductible, and the copay. And in the United States, if you have a serious illness, when you add those three up, it is enough to bankrupt you if you're in the lower income. So if I had a magic wand I thought could change the whole reputation of the industry, it would be get rid of out-of-pocket cost. People would look at what we provide them with very differently, rather than at their moment of weakness, they have to go bankrupt to access the drug.
I think that's a really good point related to how across the different parties in the system, we should be able to work together to figure those things out, because I think industry can play a positive role. I think insurers can play a positive role, but we have to be more transparent and then sit down and talk about these things.
As Albert said, now that the insurance companies own the PBMs, that might be a long-term solution.
I think it's directionally good thing for me. But still, there is a long way before the two interests are integrated.
Yes.
My name is Kenneth Mock. I'm the CEO of Cognition Therapeutics, which is an Alzheimer's-focused company. I have to say, I guess at the beginning, I've not had the pleasure of working with you. But I got about 40 years left in my career, so there's hope for us both, I suspect.
Better hurry. I'm not.
No, I got 40 years. Come on. So I want to go back to something that was said before about return on investment, but take it in a slightly different direction. It seems to me this industry is increasingly bimodal. There are market-focused companies, the pharmaceutical industry that really is oligopolizing and has continued to do so over the last 40 years. And then there's a whole other set of companies, obviously the biotechnology companies, which I define as research and development pipelines unencumbered by revenue. And so well, it's kind of true. And so our return on investment calculations are different. You return on investments based on products you're selling. Our return on investment is the perception of return to the investor base, right? The people who are putting the money into these profitless companies. So when you look at the industry and you look at last year, for example, with 59 new medicines approved, 1/3 were oncology, 1/3 were rare diseases, 1/6 with anti-infective. So 50 of 60 were smaller patient populations targeted where you can make, I don't want to say faster returns, you can better define the probability of success in those particular categories. But when you look at the highly prevalent chronic diseases, which are the primary societal costs, diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, pain, depression, schizophrenia, Alzheimer's, you see a dramatic difference in the investment rates. And so my question to you is, as we think through all these new pricing models in the future and look all the way back towards the implication for investment in the feedstock of the industry, the biotechnology companies, how does that fit into the equation? Since we survive in a way by developing medicines, and more often than not at the end of the day, a large global marketing pharmaceutical company will buy us, but the feedstock has to get funded. And clearly from the data right now, it's not at the rate that we need to really impact the societal needs. So I wonder how you address that.
Maybe a few comments, and then you want to simply go ahead.
I think it's back to the value definition. How do you create? It's okay. How do you create value, and how do you measure value? And it's not easy. That's why it's a long way, and this is a discipline that we need to create. But because how do you compare the value? Let's say you bring a product which is treating Alzheimer or preventing Alzheimer deterioration. What type of value does it create compared to an overall survival gain of 1 year in oncology? These are not easy dimension, but we need to get experimented at doing that. I think this is the only way to respond to your question.
I think it's a great question, and I think great points that you made. Just a few perspectives. First of all, I don't think the pharmaceutical industry is oligopoly. I don't think there's one that has more than 9-10% market share, and there are very few industries.
That's the definition of an oligopoly, though. When there were 50, 60, 70 companies in 1970, and everybody's kind of buying each other along the way, that's at least the trend towards.
I think you're right that there is a trend of consolidation, which is driven by the need to decrease cost and the pressure, but still I think they are in a situation that they are still very fragmented. But it's a good point. It's not the point. I think the main point that you made was that there is a whole ecosystem that it is creating innovation right now. And you are right that in the past that was much heavily concentration on inside the pharmaceutical companies, R&D, because the science was very simple at that time. And there were very few targets known, and there were very few pathways known. You knew cardiovascular is cholesterol the target, and you knew that it's statins or something else. So in that world, it made sense that inside the house you will try to resolve the issue. Now, for any known disease, there are zillion targets known, and for every target, there are zillion approaches. So it's important that you have an ecosystem that is feeding. This doesn't mean that the pharmaceuticals are not focused on R&D themselves, because 20%, 18 to 20% is the average that right now the pharmaceuticals spend as percent of their revenues. No other industry is doing that. But it's extremely important, the world of biotech, and particularly in the US, because the world of biotechs have been boomed here in this country because there was a market. So as a result, there were investors that were willing to put their money. And those investors, they are chickening out now. I know. And it's one thing to speak about we don't like patents and we should take them away. In the past, having a patent was an honor for someone, right? It was a title of honor. Now it's becoming like the Antichrist sometimes. And what I want to say is that for companies like us, maybe we can weather these things because we have strong balance sheets, but all these 5,000 biotechs that they're heavily dependent on capital markets, they're having issues right now. And I think the thing that the better reputation of pharma is affecting you as well, because we are all on the same goal. So the points that you made, I think, were the right ones. Is about value, and it is about creating incentives so that people will risk their money. It's all about that. Unfortunately, it's not goodwill that will find cancer cure. It is significant investments of people that are willing to fail 99 times before they get one success.
And I think when we talk about pricing, we need to not lose the impact on these smaller companies. And I think that really gets lost in the equation.
I fully agree.
A return on investment isn't return on a product, it's return on capital invested in a highly risky venture, separate from kind of the difference between a department store and a boutique.
Fully agree. Yep. You are
I
absolutely
have to
right.
agree with you because that's the position that we're in today. And somebody has to continue to be willing to invest in therapies that a given indication may not have $1 billion revenue opportunity, but it doesn't mean that there aren't patients who need that therapy. And we have to find the way to do that in as efficient, a manner as possible. We also maybe have to find ways to be a little bit more efficient across the industry in terms of how much we invest in general and administrative costs and sales and marketing infrastructure. And some people will not want to hear me say that, but I'm going to say it because I don't think that every little company needs to have massive commercial infrastructure. We have enough commercial infrastructure in this country. But because sometimes we can't look at each other, whether it's us three or some other three sitting up here, and get our interests aligned and our egos out of the way, we all feel like we need to go out there and build commercial infrastructure because we're going to be better than Pfizer, even though we're 50 people in there, 3,000 people or whatever. And at some point, we have to just do it differently. Because you can only support the platforms that will allow you to make those investments in those smaller indications of high unmet medical need if you can make a little bit more money off of something else that's got a higher revenue opportunity. So
I just wanted to, along those lines, give a shout out for Takeda, which has, as many companies have retreated from CNS drug development, for staying the course and having a rich pipeline.
Thank you. Well, speaking of...
We are in neuroscience, and we are investing on neuroscience. It's one of the therapy areas we have selected.
Thank you. Keep it up, please.
we're all going to need it one day.
Just to cement the relationship between investment and price, you just look at the amount of research throughout the industry for new antibiotics. That with a rising level of resistant organisms throughout the world, the amount of research going on is minuscule around the world. Now we need that, and the reason for that is the price. You can go in with a life-saving drug in a hospital for 10 days of treatment, cure the person, and I don't know what the price is today. Albert, what is the average price for an antibiotic? For life-saving?
Typically should be very small because most of the products are off patent because for many years there's not enough research to bring new innovation. You're right.
So that's it. Okay, I saw another hand. Yes.
Hi, thank you.
We need a microphone here.
Microphone right here.
Can,
A question?
No.
Yes, but that gentleman speaking, I think.
yeah.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Keishan. I'm one of the Merck employees. Thank you for the panelists for being here. As we all know, I'm also a physician myself. As we all know, U.S. spends about more than 25% of their GDP in healthcare for a variety of reasons, including not having transparency, which we wholeheartedly believe as physicians that there should be transparency, and especially, because a lot of these numbers that we see from, like personally, when we see patients and as physicians, we have no idea what the charges are. We have no idea what the costs are for for the patient itself. And when patients ask us about these costs, we have no answers about these costs. I mean, I agree that there has to be transparency, and the issue with what we find is that we've based on value-based medicine. That's a new concept. The adoption of value-based medicine has created a lot of these CMS incurred metrics, which has driven a lot of almost a template type of medicine, where we have to check all these boxes in order to to meet these metrics, which are associated and tied to all the other incentives that are out there for not only for physicians but also for the hospital systems itself and healthcare in general. Now, as far as when you say when you talk about value-based drug pricing, recently the Speaker of the House in Congress unveiled a plan about value-based pricing in medicine. So then my question is, do you see that as a sort of a de facto nationalization of pricing itself?
Hello?
Thank you.
No, I don't think so. I think
I'm in the conference.
the key is to have
He's the president. So.
actors.
Wait, we got 4 on the panel.
The key is to have actors who are sufficiently integrated so that they manage a patient across the value chain of the healthcare system, and that's where you can do value-based healthcare. And that has been the issue not only in the US but in many countries. It's all fragmented, it's siloed, and that's very difficult. Then you end up negotiating just the price of a product versus another product, but you don't look at the impact on the overall healthcare. So it doesn't need to be nationalized to do value-based healthcare, I think. I don't know what
questions.
She's had a question over here
Yes,
for
over
a
here.
while, but
Over here.
Thanks.
Can't see her.
Wonderful panel.
Please go ahead.
I was going to ask on the notion of determining value, especially given the poor reputation of the industry, and the fact that it's very hard to explain to a consumer gross to net and PBMs and a number of these things we've been speaking about. The United Kingdom for many years, which has a national system, albeit there are additional insurance packages you can buy, has NICE, which I've never thought was very nice, but it's been going a long time. And its objective is quality years of life. I forgot what the number is now, 38,000 sterling or something. Okay. I guess, do you think we need a NICE? The second question is a small footnote that I'm sure you're familiar all with ICE, the consulting firm that does work. They did work for Regeneron on their new psoriasis product, which really had great data. It was a great data. They recommended a price which was lower than Regeneron had originally hinted they would do, and it isn't reimbursed anywhere. The price was just completely rejected, even though it was actually below some products now in the market. Mm-hmm. So I guess what I'm asking is, without some sort of complete or quasi-nationalization, although you could argue, I guess, with Medicare and Medicaid and the VA, we have partial nationalization. What do we need to do? Because we're just not going to be able, company by company, in my opinion, to go out and do value-based pricing in this current climate where the only thing the Republicans and Democrats can agree on at all is drug pricing as a problem.
Maybe I can take a stab on the first part, which is the NICE. Do I think if we need a NICE? First, let's see what were the consequences of NICE in the UK. And I will refer to 2 of them. One was that UK used to be the mecca of biological research. This triangle of Oxford, London, and Cambridge, was where most of the medicines were invented. And then Europe the same. Very few are staying there. The whole biotech of UK has been moved into the US, and it is now in the Cambridge area, in the California area, and around the country as well. So that's the first consequence that now they start seeing, particularly now that the country is leaving Europe, and they want the biotech industry to be one of the pillars of the country, and they realize that they destroyed. The second is, if you get cancer, you don't want to get it in UK. It is the statistics are very brutal. In the US, for example, I agree that we have all these prices issues through the system, but the system works. From all over the world, if you get cancer, they are coming here. And for a reason. And the life expectancy in the US, the 5 years life expectancy for cancer for men is 42% higher than in Europe. And for women, 15% higher than in Europe. There is a difference because there are choices of medicines here. And remember that the medicines, even the most expensive ones, they remain expensive for an exclusivity period of 10 or 12 years, right? There are some anomalies in the system, but typically they are the only medical intervention that has embedded into it a price control mechanism. After 10 years, the price for 10 cents from $10. This is not the case with liver transplants. This is not the case with hospitalization. They don't go 10 years after the surgery was invented down. They keep going up forever. So this is why I want to say that this type of, let's try to create formulas that basically will give me the alibi why I'm going to cut your price, has significant consequences to the health of your people and to your research infrastructure. And this will happen in UK, I think.
The question.
I think it's very important because at the moment there is a lot of comparison between the US and the European systems, but people forget that it's not all rosy there, and there are a lot of access issues. The difference is that there is more inequality in the system in the US. So the European system are more equitable, but everybody is facing sometimes a huge restriction, in fact, which is not transparent to the patient as well. So in many countries where there is a restriction, nobody knows, and everybody is happy with the healthcare system, and they don't know what is available elsewhere. But there is no doubt that you get more access to the most innovative medicine much faster, and overall more access in the United States compared to many European countries. But I think back to your question, the value-based approach method, it's not really, I mean, we are catalyzing it, but it should come from the companies which are managing the life of the patient and managing the insurance and the economy of that. It should come from them.
Yes, but Christophe, I don't know how current these data are, but almost no insurance company, private insurance company, keeps a patient for more than about 3 years. Now, Medicare and Medicaid, that is life care. And I think that's reflected in a number of decisions.
But that's what needs to be improved. How can you create a system where either they stay longer or they are somehow transferred without a reset? I mean, it's complicated, but yeah.
When we talk about price problems, we haven't said, do we have an insurance problem? Maybe we have both, but.
So we've just got a few minutes left, and you know, one has the feeling that if our industry doesn't do something to change, we're in the spotlight, as everyone has pointed out, then change will be imposed on us. And so I thought I might ask you all in closing, each one of you to just say what one thing you might do, what lever might you pull from your position that might address the situation we're living in and maybe avoid the imposition of external controls.
Yes, I think the most important is to change our reputation, and the reputation is there are two things that contributing to this bad reputation. One is a real problem out of pocket that needs to be addressed, and the other is all this bad will that has been created over time that we need to reverse. And we spoke a lot about the first one during the panel. On the second one, which is how to create goodwill, we need to feel proud that we are working in the best industry in the world. I know that all the companies are doing what I'm going to say, but Pfizer, for example, we had 780 million people. We touched the lives of 250 million people with our medicines. 50 million people were vaccinated, likely in last year, likely the most vulnerable, babies or very older people, right? 30, 40 million, I think, for cardiovascular diseases. 2 million people for cancer, more north of 2 million people for cancer. How many fathers or mothers, they will live long enough to see the wedding of the son or the graduation of the daughter because of us? I believe that there is no other industry that is producing so much good to humanity. And first, we need to believe it ourselves, and then we need to be passionate advocates to the society and the community.
Yeah. Christophe.
Three things. One, continue to discover and develop innovative medicine. So, I mean, at the end of the day, that's also what is very, very important, to deliver medicine against unmet medical need. Two, price it properly so that it's reflecting the value of the product. Three, have the mechanism in place so that no patient is left behind. If the healthcare system is not able to do that, we should step in, especially when we are dealing with life-saving and life-transforming medicine.
Jackie.
Yep, so I would say two things. We're trying to be more proactive in terms of how we discuss value propositions with payers and get their input. So it's not just us doing the analysis, because they know more about the cost of the system than we do in some instances. And the second thing we're doing, and we're small and we're biotech, so maybe our reputation's not completely horrible yet, but we're trying to work with larger companies and find ways to collaborate on clinical trials that would speed maybe the process to regulatory approvals and cut out some of the cost inefficiencies in the system as well, whether it's clinical trials or other ways that we might be able to work together with other companies.
I think we're out of time, and I would like to thank our terrific panel who have done a great job in explaining our situation.
That was really touching.